over the weekend that the IMF and the EU will be stepping in to make those loans. It will come with some very strict austerity measures from the Greeks, but there are people today that are saying it still won't matter. It still won't be enough. The contagion will continue to spread, and at the end of the day, this is just a Band-Aid on a problem that will continue to fester. What do you think?
Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, you've got this unusual situation in the European Union where individual countries are sovereign in determining their own budgets. They may get pressured by others, but they're sovereign in terms of their budgets. But they can't print their own currency. We can print our own currency. We can always pay our debts in the United States as long as we borrow in dollars, and we'll just keep printing more dollars. The Greeks can't do that, or other members of because they're tied to the euro, but they determine their own budget. It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, because if you can sort of behave irresponsibly as one member and expect the other members to bail you out, that's an inducement. That's a real inducement for everybody to not behave so well. So I don't know how it's going to come out in Europe.
What about Portugal and Spain and even potentially Italy?
Yeah. Well, I don't know the countries involved, but you can say every member, once one member sort of gets away with misbehaving to some degree in terms of their own budget and others bail them out, that is the ultimate in moral hazard. That's what we talk about all the time in this country, and it's happening on a big scale in Europe. I don't know what will happen there. It's going to be an interesting movie to watch, but I don't know the ending.
You've made bets on currencies in the past. How confident and comfortable would you feel with making a bet on the euro?
Yeah, I don't feel confident now in making a bet on any currency versus another. In other words, in terms of the euro, the pound, the yen, the dollar, because I think all currencies are likely to lose value in terms of purchasing power. And if you're betting on one versus the other, you essentially are trying to guess which one will depreciate in value the most. But I don't like betting on the future purchasing power of any currency.
You don't like betting on the future purchasing power of any currency, but would you say that the IMF and the EU have dealt with this properly to this point to try and jump in?
I don't know how it's going to play out. I mean, they have to do something, and what they have to avoid is contagion and moral hazard, and who knows what's going on in the minds of bond investors all over the world, as we sit here, when they see a situation where the credit default swaps went to where they did on Greece and all that. It's predicting economic behavior gets very tough when you get into sort of uncharted territory like this. And like I say, I don't know the answer, so therefore I'm not making any bets.
Right. Warren, I'd like to play some sound from Charlie Munger. We spoke with him over the weekend, and Charlie has a way of putting things that drive home points quite well. He talked a little bit about envy. He was talking about where the street is headed, what can be done to try and bring the street back into line. And I believe his comment, again, I'm not sure if we have this right now in the control room, but this comment on envy that he had is one, I'll read it to you if we can't find it. He said, you have it right now? Okay, let's play that soundbite from Charlie Munger, and Warren, you can listen in and see what he said.
Okay, good.
Well, I would argue that envy is a much more serious mischief maker than greed.
How so?
There's something in human nature that just can't stand, even if you're making $5 million a year, that dumb bastard down the street is making $7 million.
So those were his comments. He thinks envy is the biggest problem, not greed.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that at Solomon. I mean, you'd say, how could a guy that's making $3 or $4 million a year be unhappy? And he's not unhappy until he finds the guy next to him who he thinks he's smarter than, making a few dollars more. And as I've always said, envy seems to me the silliest of the 7 deadly sins, because the other guy doesn't feel it. All you do is feel worse. You're sitting there with your stomach churning because you're envious, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense. I've always said, if you're going to pick some sins from the 7 deadly sins, go with gluttony and lust, and you can have a hell of a weekend if nothing else.
But is there any way to legislate or regulate human emotions like that?
No.
Is there anything that Washington can do?
No, you can't do it. I tried on it various ways on compensation at Solomon. No, I'm a failure at controlling envy. And you have to decide, you have to devise incentive systems for everybody that you work with. And incidentally, that's one of the objections I have to the new bill on derivatives. I think it's a good thing overall, but I think that unless you change the incentives for the CEO and the directors of really large financial institutions. They've got all the upside and they don't have downside. I mean, what director of any one of about half a dozen institutions we can name that have cost shareholders hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, who's really suffering financially? They may suffer in terms of losing prestige, but they all go away rich. The directors are still getting $200,000 or $300,000 a year. The CEOs still, have got their multiple houses and everything. I would have something there that if you run a large financial institution and you end up having to get saved by the U.S. government, that you and your spouse are broke and that the directors pay a significant price themselves, not that drastic, and then you'll change human behavior that way. You can change behavior by incentives, but you can't usually change behavior by sermons, although people try every Sunday.
Do you have directors and officers of insurance at Berkshire Hathaway?
No. If Berkshire goes down, everybody goes down, and they should.
Okay. Warren, just a final thought. Again, Goldman has been the biggest headline over the last several weeks. Where do you think we head next? What happens next at Goldman?
Well, it's conceivable there's some settlement. There always is when two parties disagree on something like this, and otherwise it plays out over a long period of time, probably. Our Solomon thing, in Solomon it took us 9 months and 4 days. And 9 months and 4 days, it felt like 9 months and 4 days. Every day was painful, but it does play out over time.
It does play out over time. Okay. Another question, one thing to take a look at is your thoughts on Moody's and the ratings agencies. You defended the ratings agencies, or at least their business model, over the weekend. Is this? Well,
I didn't. I said they've got a great business model. I mean, they charge us a lot of money, and I can't negotiate it downward. I mean, I can't say if Moody's and Standard & Poor's want to rate Berkshire or I need their rating, I can't go to them and say, how about doing it for 10% less, or I'll go over to XYZ. They've got me in terms of. So they have pricing strength. And it's a business that requires no capital whatsoever. So here, a business with zero capital in it that has great pricing power. That doesn't mean I defend all their actions or anything, but it does mean they've got a terrific business unless it gets changed in some way by legislation. I think they made the same mistakes that everybody else made. I think they had a model in their mind, and actually a model on paper, that said residential real estate can't fall off a cliff. Mm-hmm. And once they had the wrong model, they got the wrong answer. They were no smarter and probably no more stupid than most of the American public, and people may feel that they should have been smarter. I mean, that was their business.
All right. Well, Warren, we want to thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate your time.